You read that title right. This is an emergency. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. Make yourselves comfortable. This will be a long one, but not too comfortable. I have a dire warning for you today, and I need you, the country needs you, to take it seriously. More to the point, you need to take it seriously. America, since its foundation, has always functioned according to the rule of law. Thomas Paine, in his famous pamphlet, Common Sense, famously said, "The law is king." This is still the clearest statement that America should be a republic in which the law does rule. But now we see the law yielding to the worst kind of political expediency. Today, members of the permanent political class literally do not care whether you live or die. And at least some of them want you to die so that they can rule without you to oppose them. All of which to say that the people must now defend themselves directly because we cannot depend on government institutions to enforce the law. We're going to talk about that in detail. We'll start with the Roe v. Wade draft leak, not only because that's part of it, but also because the reaction to it shows us what kind of people we're dealing with, better than I could do so myself. We're also going to talk about how, in the words of a particularly wise United States Senator, the law is now optional for the left and selectively applied. You will hear about prosecuting attorneys who won't prosecute when they should. We'll talk about crime and the deliberate campaign to disarm the public even in the face of that crime. Yes, there's hope. I see evidence that some of you are waking up to this. It's showing up in polls and to some extent in primary and special elections, but the situation is a lot more serious than that. Bear with me. I know it will be hard, and I will tell you about the most important thing you can do, and also about the things it is most important to cast aside. We cannot afford any more division on a group level or on an individual level. I said emergency, and I mean it. Before I begin, I want to shout out to the sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views, link in the description. And be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of good merchandise there, including this t-shirt I'm wearing that reads Rhino Hunting. While I'm at it, I want to shout out to another sponsor, BitNext. This is your replacement for Zoom, Slack, the Google G Suite, Microsoft Office 365, Dropbox, WeTransfer, and Chili Piper, among others. Unlike any of them, BitNext protects your content and conversations so well that even the administrators can't see it. So this is your channel for secure comms, conferencing, cloud storage, and file sharing. Best of all, everything is back-end, so you don't even need client software. If you have a browser, you can use BitNext. Follow the link and give them a try. 28 days free of charge. You can't beat that with a stick. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the briefing will now begin. I will now discuss in detail the threats to the rule of law in an order I hope will make sense to you. The recent draft leak in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization puts one threat to the rule of law in stark relief. That leak itself broke the law to begin with. Whoever leaked that draft could only have done it to break the majority in favor of overruling Roe v. Wade. I still suspect one of two justices of the Supreme Court in engineering it. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, the most radical of the 9 after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, is the obvious suspect. Her conduct during oral argument in certain cases and her reputation for hiring the most radical of clerks provides grounds to suspect her. But Chief Justice John Roberts is also suspect, and probably even more. The late Earl Stanley Gardner followed a good rule. The one you are least likely to suspect ends up being the guilty one, and I think that rule holds in this case. Arguably, he, as Chief Justice, Roberts, as Chief Justice, has the best opportunity of any of the 9. He should know Sotomayor's reputation, which would make framing her ridiculously easy. Furthermore, he has a power Sotomayor doesn't have, the power to delay release of the final opinion. The precedent of the 2020 term, in theory, lets him delay releasing an opinion in Dobbs until August. In fact, I told you all about that 2 days ago. Justice Sam Alito wrote the blistering draft opinion. According to a further leak, Justices Barrett, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Thomas will join him. Roberts offers to sacrifice the respondent in the case to save Roe. Breyer, Kagan, and Sotomayor would, of course, dissent. Thomas will never budge, so maybe Roberts is working on Barrett, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh already has had someone try to assassinate him, and apparently the president doesn't care. Now Barrett faces the intimidation of her children in school. We have no word on any threat against Gorsuch so far. But let's not forget Thomas. He won't budge, so the pro-abortion side wants to remove him. That explains the ridiculous charges against his wife, Ginny, that she had a hand in what Democrats falsely label an insurrection on January 6, 2021. In fact, she can't wait to give her evidence to that silly committee, according to one report, but I digress. They want to remove Thomas from the bench on impeachment for and conviction of treason, but they know they'll never get 2/3 of the Senate to convict him on that charge. So they are playing for time and trying to make Thomas feel guilty and resign, or else someone is planning to murder him, just as someone tried to murder Kavanaugh. And that in turn brings us to the Democratic elected officials balking on providing enhanced protection for Supreme Court justices and their families. We already saw the picketing of some justices' homes. That already violates the law. Title 18 United States Code Section 1507. Look it up, sports fans. I've left a link in the description so you can do just that. Governors Glenn Youngkin of Virginia and Larry Hogan of Maryland, both Republicans, have already written U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland about this. Their message is simple. Mr. Attorney General, do your job. Well, not only will Garland not do his job, but the White House has been egging them on from the start. This goes clear back to when Jen Psaki was still running the White House press office, and it is still going on today. After the draft leak, the Senate voted unanimously to provide enhanced protection for all 9 court members. They called that measure the Supreme Court Police Parity Act, but the House stalled on that. Speaker Pelosi offered the lame excuse that the enhanced protection does not extend to the clerks. That doesn't matter. If the rule of law means a thing, you pass one measure to protect those already under threat, then you debate whether to extend federal protection to an additional class of persons. And last I heard, no one was picketing the homes of Supreme Court clerks. 3 days ago, the House finally passed the Supreme Court Police Parity Act, but 27 House Democrats voted against it. They include almost all members of the so-called Squad, the almost all-female ultra-communist caucus in the House. Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, to her credit, actually voted in favor. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas recently called the White House and other Democrats on egging on the illegal protests and not doing anything after the attempted assassination of Kavanaugh. I have a link in the description to the article in Mediaite describing that event. He was on a stage with a group calling themselves Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising. Now, how they came to be anti-abortion and still leftists, and whether they are even sincere, is a mystery for another day. But the occasion for that press conference is no mystery. The owners of an abortion clinic in the District of Columbia had disposed of 5 unborn children, all of them near term, when abortion is clearly illegal. The practitioners either killed them in the womb or left them to die after birth. And the group was trying to get the United States Attorney General to investigate, which he will not. Here is the full text of Senator Cruz answering a question about whether Democrats even care about the rule of law. Quote, I think, unfortunately, for the left, the law is viewed as optional. If they disagree with the law, they refuse to enforce it. Whether it is the federal criminal law that protects these children, or whether it is the federal criminal law that protects Supreme Court justices. We saw yesterday a man arrested for attempted murder of a Supreme Court justice. That crime was actively encouraged by elected Democrats. Chuck Schumer went to the steps of the Supreme Court and threatened the justices. The White House actively encouraged protesters to go to the homes of Supreme Court justices, despite the fact that there's a federal criminal prohibition on doing so while a court case is pending. The only time that I'm aware of where the White House, literally from the White House press room, has encouraged the ongoing commission of a felony. And even today, the Department of Justice has not arrested the protesters that are violating criminal law on its face because the President and the Attorney General agree with the politics. Well, the law is meant to be applied regardless of party, unquote Senator Cruz. Which brings us to another threat to the rule of law, simple refusal to enforce it. George Soros, the mad financier that has, over the past several years, financed the election of prosecuting attorneys who won't prosecute when the law calls for it. Many of these non-prosecutors continue in office to this day, although the people of San Francisco recalled their non-prosecutor in a recent recall election. We see this abuse of prosecutorial discretion in threats not to enforce anti-abortion laws. Several states have laws already on the books that have lain dormant since Roe v. Wade. Others have passed trigger laws that will take effect if, as we still expect, the court overrules Roe. But the Associated Press tells us that several prosecutors won't prosecute abortion providers or seekers. Nor again will the U.S. Attorney General arrest those who are picketing Supreme Court justices at home. And this is the one whom Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota wanted to make a Supreme Court justice. She wanted it so badly that she blubbed about the refusal of Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, who was then the majority floor leader, to bring him up for a vote. You want to know what I think? I think Senator McConnell stopped a bullet when he did that. We also saw violent attacks against those offering young women an alternative to abortion. Pro-abortion activists have vandalized and firebombed at least 6 pro-life offices and crisis pregnancy centers in Buffalo, New York alone. We know these are pro-abortion activists because the group calling themselves Jane's Revenge bragged about it. I have a link in the description to a video report from Newsmax TV describing that particular crime spree. Nor does the violence limit itself to the targeting of pro-life offices and clinics. Crime runs rampant in any city of any size, especially if Democrats run it. The notion of defunding the police remains current in Democratic Party circles. We see such attacks against conservative politicians. On Sunday night, someone threw a firebomb into the office of State Representative Andrew Barkas of Lacey, Washington State. The only reason it didn't burn down the building is that the office had a masonry floor. State Representative J.T. Wilcox provided video, to which I've left a link in the description. Other influencers ask why we see no coverage of the incident, and I've left links in the description to the 2 best tweets I could find. The worst example of this politicians being copacetic with selective enforcement of laws against violent crime comes from one stag member of the squad. Representative Jamal Bowman from New York State actually said that white nationalists want civil war in the country. Why would he say a thing like that? Could it be that he has similar plans? Clearly somebody does. I found a tweet from a user who copied out the Jane's Revenge manifesto, and I've left a link in the description of that too. Now, I'm not going to quote all of that. That would take too long. I'll just give you some lowlights. They seem to take credit for attacks in no fewer than 15 separate locations in almost as many states and in the nation's capital city. They scorn those who counsel against abortion as, and I quote, "you who impersonate healthcare providers in order to harm the vulnerable," unquote. Then they say this, and I'd say that pretty much sums up what the modern American left is all about. I quote, "we are versatile, we are mercurial, and we answer to no one but ourselves," unquote. Then they speak of open season and of the infrastructure of the enslavers. Those are fighting words, and I haven't even quoted half of it. They have ripped off their mask and made plain that their agenda is to kill people and to incite others to do so. 25 pro-life group leaders signed an open letter to Merrick Garland. Like Governors Youngkin and Hogan, they have a plain message: do your job. Why won't these officers do their jobs? the politics of abortion, again, are only part of the problem. In fact, the left has a fundamental problem with enforcement of criminal law. Modern activists see any burglar or looter as another Jean Valjean stealing a loaf of bread to feed his family. A thief is an irregular wealth redistribution agent. Worse, a murderer is an irregular population thinner. That applies equally to a common garden variety murderer as to an abortionist. Except when they want to use a mass shooting, especially at school, to make a gun control point, they don't seem to care about the hundreds of murders happening in our cities today. And that brings us to the next threat to the rule of law: blatant attempts to disarm the public. The ruling elite know that they dare not order the military or law enforcement to go door to door confiscating firearms. Current registration records record 130 million firearms owners in the United States. That's only the ones the government knows about. Moreover, the virus that shall remain nameless and sudden adult death syndrome, of which I'll let you guess the cause, has reduced our military to half strength. And that half that is still strong might include a few bully boys and bully girls who would love to kick in doors and take people's guns. But the overwhelming bulk of active duty military enlistees would refuse such an order. The same source that told me about the military being down to half strength also said that the first officer to order gun confiscation will only start a mutiny. So, the ruling elite has to make you feel guilty for having guns and thus turn them in. To that end, Beto O'Rourke and Matthew McConaughey make grandstand plays after the Uvalde school shooting. A state representative in Delaware actually tells Second Amendment supporters to kill themselves. And Governor Tom Big Bad Wolf of Pennsylvania posts a cartoon telling how red flag laws would work. I've left a link in the description of that cartoon, and I'm going to try to describe it for you here. The cartoon has 6 frames with arrows pointing your way. Here are the captions. This is Jane. Jane's social media contact, Randy, posts photos of guns and cryptic messages. Jane calls the police to report the post. The police petition in court for temporarily, Wolf's words, remove Randy's guns. Police provide evidence. What evidence? That Randy is a danger to himself or others. The court agrees to a temporary removal of Randy's weapons. Now, just how temporary that is, you don't have to guess, do you? I put it to you that you know someone who got red flagged just this way. The Virginia Citizens Defense League could tell you all about how abusive red flag laws can be, and I'm sure you'll find their counterparts in your state too. At least someone had the wit to point out that it works both ways. I have a link in the description to his tweet. He writes, "This is Jane. Randy doesn't like Jane, so he calls the police on her. Police petition in court to seize Jane's weapons without Jane being able to present a defense." And that's the key. Red flag proceedings don't even require the target to be present in court. They get no summons, no order to show cause, nothing. And to go on. The court approves it and a SWAT team shows up at Jane's home early in the morning. Jane has been swatted. Now, let me explain. SWAT in cop talk means Special Weapons Assault Team or Special Weapons and Tactics. To SWAT means to sick SWAT on somebody by a method just like this. Dana Lish followed up with a tweet of her own, and again, I've left a link in the description. She writes, "Also, it doesn't solve the problem that if Randy is dangerous, his firearms are taken, and he's left there with knives, cars, and the black market for guns, where 77+% get their guns, according to the DOJ." And then she adds this, which no doubt she can't resist. "I love the cryptic messages. Considering that people are getting banned all over social media or fired from their jobs for wrongthink, no way in HE double hockey sticks would anyone trust red flags laws." Actually, I just bowdlerized that, but hey, truer words were never spoken. Now, are people waking up to the real enemies of the rule of law? Maybe. A new Yahoo News/YouGov poll shows that clear majorities of both party rank-and-file members call it likely that America will cease to be a democracy in the future. Not only that, but Republicans and Democrats are, not Republicans, not Democrats, are winning the preserve democracy argument. I've left a link in the description to an extract from the poll that shows just that. Now let me make myself perfectly clear. The United States of America is not and never has been a democracy. A democracy not only has direct popular legislation, but also does not respect any laws that is unchangeable. Ancient Athens, which scholars call the mother of democracy, invented ostracism, banishment by popular vote. The framers of the Constitution had a phrase for that, Bill of Attainder, which means a legislative act declaring someone an outlaw. Those same framers forbade that. They also forbade the ex post facto law, punishing someone for an act that wasn't illegal when he performed it. These are only two of the prohibitions that make America a republic, not a democracy. A republic functions on the rule of law. A democracy does not, and risks devolution to an oligarchy ruled by a few. But the point is still well taken. People realize that if anyone threatens good government, Democrats have. The problem is that the ruling elite know that we know, and they will not go quietly into the night. As further evidence, consider the president's plan to use his emergency powers to circumvent state laws against abortion. This after Senator Patty Murray from Washington State threatened unspecified protest if he did not. I have left a link in the description to video from the Hill in which she made the threat. Biden went further. He suggested that a mini-revolution would result if the Supreme Court overrules Roe. Just what exactly that means, he didn't say. The worst problem the country now faces is that political ideology now supersedes the rule of law. That certainly holds on one side of the political divide. If members of the House and Senate respected the rule of law, none of them would have said the kinds of things I've just quoted some of them as saying. Instead, they would have long ago cleaned out this administration using the impeachment power of the House and the trial authority of the Senate, and they would have done so with one voice. Sadly, impeachment has always been a political act. It is the one exception to the no Bill of Attainder rule in the Constitution. The impeachment of Andrew Johnson was a political statement without foundation. So were the two impeachments of Donald J. Trump. Bill Clinton suffered impeachment, but for the wrong offense. The House should have impeached him, accused him of treason. Instead, they accused him of perjury in a civil lawsuit. And the Senate, in Democratic hands, nullified that accusation. Similarly, Congress has practiced legislative nullification on high crimes and misdemeanors in office and on offenses tantamount to treason. Meanwhile, the House seats a committee that exists mainly to pass bills of attainder and an ex post facto law. It also exists to propose constitutional amendments and other measures to eliminate the Electoral College and federalize all elections. If those measures pass, then the federal government will be a government of, by, and for the lawless. And that's the emergency the country now faces. We have public prosecutors, some elected, some appointed, who refuse to prosecute their protected classes of offenders. Furthermore, we see legislatures and executives making public statements that amount to incitement to riot, pillage, and theft. To them, anyone who disagrees with them forfeits all the protections of the law. Then they try to take your guns away and callously let criminals do what they will. The only exceptions they make to that are those of whom they want to make examples to advance their agenda. We have a slim chance to set that right. Midterms are coming up, and a very angry electorate stands ready to flip the House and Senate. Happily, patriots know now how to bolster the integrity of our elections. They proved that during the Virginia pre-midterm, and I was part of that as an officer of election. But the people must remember, guard, and exercise the rights that go to the heart of our constitutional system. That means arming ourselves and ignoring the heart-rending rhetoric that accompanies mass shootings. Point out that mass shootings need not occur anyway. They don't in Utah. Already, a certain representative proposes a 1,000% excise tax on certain long gun models. This being a tax, he proposes using budget reconciliation to pass it. Don't let things get to that pass. Get your guns now before anyone even tries to enforce such a tax. The ruling elite have given away their game with their loose talk of civil war. So we must prepare now and fight it if we must. And remember, this is the United States of America, not Canada. When the Prime Minister of Canada dares tell his people, and I quote, "You can't use a gun for self-protection in Canada, that's not a right that you have." When he says that, he paints a picture of a future the ruling elite in America want to set up here. Furthermore, he shows how much he fears the people deciding they want to protect themselves. No doubt he wishes he or his predecessors had acted as Australia acted. In Australia, they did confiscate guns, with the result that Australia might as well resume its original name, Botany Bay, a vast prison colony. Obviously, we have another problem, with the excuses the elite have for not wanting ordinary citizens to have guns. Actor Spencer Tracy expressed that sentiment in the motion picture Adam's Rib. "I don't approve of crazy women armed with deadly weapons." Domestic violence does happen, and it happens because people enter into marriage without thinking of what marriage should be about. This offers yet another reason for the spiritual reawakening that General Douglas MacArthur recommended. But that's just for the future. We have a problem now with people predicating our rights on the conduct of bad actors. Lysander Spooner famously told us what was wrong with that. So here is my message to everyone who values his freedom. If you have a problem with someone in your life, solve it. Don't wait to become a statistic that someone can use to take away your rights and those of others. The church can and should step up to solve the problem not only of domestic violence but also of mental health. Drugs might lift someone out of depression, but they leave him with the thoughts that drove him to that depression. Such a person becomes a time bomb. We must put a stop to this. Professors of medicine always tell their students to treat the underlying cause, and then don't do it. Maybe our clergy have the better tools to treat the underlying cause, and those tools don't include pills. In closing, liberty and the rule of law, especially in a republic, rests on the 4 boxes. In the order of resort, they are the soap box, the jury box, the ballot box, and the bullet box. For the soap box, read freedom of speech and of the press. The jury box explains itself. That's also why the other part of the 7th Amendment says that one does not second-guess a jury. The ballot box also explains itself, and the country knows only too well. One of our enemies actually said it. Elections have consequences. Which brings us to another issue about solving a personal problem. We have a President Biden in very large part because enough people had a problem with President Trump and his often crude modes of expression. Whether that was the sole reason we have a President Biden, some are still debating. That's why at least some jurisdictions have tightened up their election laws going into midterms, so it isn't perfect. Nevertheless, without a baseline of people having a problem with how another president expressed himself, we have a president who can't do his job. Or maybe he can, but the job he's doing threatens our liberties. Today, that baseline is shrinking. That might explain the big push to lay a guilt trip on people to turn in their guns. They know the value of the bullet box, which is why they would deny it to us. Don't let them. Now, I've left a lot of links in the description for you, and I want to make sure you get them all. We start with the article you will find on Conservative News and Views. Next, we have Title 18, United States Code, Section 1507. Ted Cruz calling out the left on optional law. The report of the 6 pro-life clinics getting firebombed in Buffalo, New York. 3 tweets about the firebombing of a legislator's office in Washington State. The Jane's Revenge Manifesto, so you know that I'm not talking through my hat there. The Jane and Randy Red Flag cartoon and the reactions to it. Evidence that Republicans are winning the preserved democracy argument. And, oh yes, Patty Murray's speech threatening to be loud. And, of course, to Conservative News and Views. I have another link to the awesome online store and to BitNext, as I also mentioned. And if you like what you've heard, You can like this video and subscribe to this channel. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.